This is the plaintiff, Kimberly Holland. She says she brought her 2007 Mercedes-Benz to the defendant's shop for repairs. When she went to retrieve the car, it wasn't running right. It was sluggish, and black smoke was billowing out of the tailpipe. The defendant towed it back to his shop and tried to fix it. She got frustrated, took her to another mechanic, and he took out the fried fuel pump and showed her the defendant did nothing to fix her car. She's here suing this inept mechanic and is seeking the $999.81 she's now owed. This is the defendant, John. He says he fixed the plaintiff's car by changing her radiator, and she also needed a new O2 sensor, but the plaintiff didn't want to spend the money. A couple of days later, the woman burnt out her fuel pump, which is totally unrelated to the radiator. Now she's trying to get him to fix her car for free. Bottom line, this is a 10-year-old car. Things start to go on older cars, and he's not in the business of doing free work for people. He's accused of not fixing it right the first time. The defendant has filed a countersuit for $400 for towing, parts, and labor.
All parties, please use your right hands.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case in the docket. The plaintiff says her mechanic screwed up her Mercedes something fierce, black smoke billowing out of the tailpipe. The defendant says her problem was a burnt-out fuel pump, which had nothing to do with what he fixed. It's the case of you failed, Mateo.
Thank you, Douglas. Kimberly Holland, you're suing John's Auto Body Repair Shop for $999.81. You say he owes you in tow fees and parts and labor that he charged you because, according to you, he didn't fix your car. You are counterclaiming against her $400 for a tow and diagnostic fees and some other parts and labor that you had previously given her, but now you're mad she sued you and now you want to get paid.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk with you first. Tell me exactly what was wrong with your car that you brought it to him.
I found out that I had oil in my antifreeze.
Okay.
At the time, my car was running perfectly fine. It was just that I was told that the antifreeze can cause further damage and that it can become a larger problem than it was. So, like I said...
So you take it to him. Does he look at it himself or did you have an employee?
Yes, I look at it myself.
You look at it yourself, and what is it you note?
When I saw the car come in, there was oil in the antifreeze. But further testing of the vehicle, I noticed that it was actually trans oil that was in it. So that was one of her problems that she had on the vehicle.
Okay. And so you fix that problem, and that problem costs her how much to fix?
Well, I fixed that problem, but besides that problem, when she had first brought her vehicle into the shop, she filled out a work order. And on the work order, it said oil and antifreeze, slow pickup, check engine light was on, and the fuel gauge wasn't working, and smell of gas.
May I see that? Didn't you just tell me there was nothing wrong with the car when you brought it to him?
As I was explaining, none of those things was keeping my car from actually... My car, in all the years that I had it, had never turned off on me, ever.
Okay.
It
So
wasn't
now
keeping
what
the car
happens?
from
He has a
driving.
car for how long?
Altogether, about a week prior to me picking it up the first time.
Okay, and so you pick it up, and what happens?
So the next morning, I go to turn the car on, and it would not turn over. After trying it for like 10 minutes, I finally called the shop. He agreed to send someone to pick the car up. He said he knew they have a tow truck that works with them. He'll send them over.
So he tows the car over, and what happens?
So he towed the car over, and literally probably about 2 hours later, I get a call from someone else at that point and says, oh, the car just turned over for me. I was able to get the car running. And I was like, well, what's the issue? He's like, I don't know. It could have been spark plugs. It could have been something, but the car is running. Come pick up your car. I get a ride over there. I pick up my car, bring it home, and park it. That was a Sunday. Monday, I drove it to work and drove it back. I went to go to a gas station, turned the car off to get the gas. When I went to turn it back on, it wouldn't start. I then contacted my insurance and got a tow truck with my insurance to bring it back to the shop. And it was there for maybe about a day or so before they finally called me back and explained to me that it was something about an O2 sensor. Ultimately, I decided I didn't want them to do the work any longer.
So what he told you was you need an O2 sensor?
An O2 sensor.
He didn't say anything about a fuel pump?
I don't believe he ever said anything about a fuel pump.
So you end up taking it to another mechanic, and that mechanic tells you you have a burnt fuel pump, correct?
Yes, he actually gave it to me.
And now, but did they burn your fuel pump as opposed to that you were driving a 2007 Mercedes and that in 10 years things go wrong, even with a Mercedes, and you know.
Of course.
You know what I'm saying? So you've come to court and you're suing them for a new fuel pump, and you're suing them because you feel they overcharged you parts and labor of $200. Why is that?
Out of the 3 different things that he told me that he replaced on my car, which was the radiator, the antifreeze, and the coils, I actually priced them, and there's a range of prices. I took the highest amount that it could have been. So if he would have gotten brand new.
And that was $200 less than what he charged you?
And it was, so what I would have, the total came out of those 3 items, came up to a total of about $600. He actually charged me about $800.
Okay,
so I
and
just
then
showed
you're
the
also
difference.
suing for towing fees, but you said your insurance covered that you didn't pay
No,
towing.
I still had to pay for that, and I have the receipt for that. It was
Let me see that.
$35 for that.
Let me see that. And then
Okay.
$94 in transportation costs. That I do need you to answer.
I didn't actually keep my receipts. I do have proof. I have what it would cost to
Let me
get
hear
to
from
and from
you.
work.
Okay. She brings the car in with the list of items that you see. So I checked the car out myself. As
Okay.
far as the oil and the antifreeze, it wasn't a head gasket, it was the radiator. As far as the car had a check engine light and was misfiring, one of the problems was the 2 ignition coils were bad. She said her fuel gauge hasn't been working for a while. So I called Mercedes up. So they told me that the recommendation is not just change the fuel pump because of the age of the car, the fuel gauge sending unit, because of the age of the car, that she would have to replace the pump with it. So I called Ms. Kimberly up, and also when we did the diagnosis, we did see that the O2 sensors were out of whack.
So, go ahead.
So what happened was I called her on the phone, and it was too much out of range. The price was too much for her at the time. She only could afford the $800 for the repairs right away. I explained to her, though,
Okay,
however...
let's fast forward this a little bit. So
Okay.
she can't start the car. It's pretty quickly afterwards, right?
Okay, so what happened, they couldn't get it started. They finally, the next day, we got it towed to the shop. I looked at the car was flooding, meaning too much fuel was getting into the engine. So I got it to start.
How do you do that?
There's a few tricks of the trade. You can take the plugs out, clean
To
them.
bleed so that the fuel that's in
Right.
the engine goes
Right,
away.
so I put the plugs back,
Right.
and I got the car to run. This was on Saturday, so I go out on the road, I got the car to run, and I do some errands, I come back, and the car's gone. My employee tells me that she came for the car, took it, she needed the car. I told her, there's more work that has to be done on this vehicle. It's not that simple. So she took the vehicle. Now, the incident where she's talking about the tow in the second time, where the fuel pump went bad, I do more diagnosis, more testing, and find out there's no fuel now going up to the engine. The fuel pump is in the gas tank behind the seat. So I remove the seat, take it apart, I open it up, and I see the fuel pump is burnt. We show her that the pump is burnt and the connector is bad. We put it in the box.
True or not true?
Absolutely not true.
He's
I
just
never
making
went
that all
there.
up?
I
All
never
right,
went
now,
there.
as
other
it
than pick
turns
my car
out,
up.
that is what you had done by the next mechanic.
Yes, and that's when
All
I
right,
received it.
So do you have any evidence from that mechanic that changing the radiator or something that they did caused your car to have a burnt fuel pump? Do you understand what I'm saying?
So, is she out of luck here, or is the repair shop responsible?
It's definitely worth an investigation.
Well, no, you got a rule now.
Okay. I think she should be checked out because they should be liable for some of that. Because if someone's messing with your car and then something's not working.
But again, it's the engine turning over is not the same as a radiator issue.
I think that it's also worth checking out. I think they take some liability when they take the car into the repair shop just because they're meddling with things that can damage it.
But it's a 10-year-old car.
I still would agree with them and think that it's worth more investigation.
Okay, well, we've done investigating. We're time for judgment going inside the courtroom.
The only evidence that the new mechanic told me was that if it initially, what he saw was not an O2 sensor, that it was the fuel pump.
Yeah, but you never
He
paid him
then-
for an O2 sensor, right?
Nope, I never did.
Right, and you
So
have a
he
brand new
explained-
brand new or
Brand new radiator.
brand new radiator in your car. So why are you suing? You see, because it's not like you had him fix a fuel pump and it still didn't work, and then you had to have somebody redo his work. You're basically suing because you brought it over there, you paid $800, and you want everything that was ever wrong and that could be wrong with the car to be fixed at that time. I realize the timing is upsetting to you, the timing of how this worked out, but you know that sometimes happens. That's how
And
you
the
know.
$800 that I spent, however, is from the time that I paid for the car, it never worked at that point. When it was in his hands, the car never worked. I picked up a car that the next day would not turn on. So I paid $800.
That's called timing. Your argument then is timing. You have to you have to say, this is suspicious because it's right after I picked up the car.
It was the next day.
I don't care if it's the next minute. That's the problem that you have. You have to be able to prove that it's something they did. Because a burnt fuel pump, unless they put it on fire during the week he had it, you know, that's something that takes a while to get done. And all you're out, besides the repair he did, was a burnt fuel pump. You're just angry that it didn't fix the car. Now, you have a counterclaim against her for $400. What's that about?
Well, Your Honor, I spent a lot of time diagnosing the car, the two tows I brought in.
Right, but you were never charging her for that. These were
know,
things you were doing. And now you're mad
never.
that she sued you, so now you want me to
Your
create
Honor,
a contract where there was none.
I wanted her, you know, to be
Yes,
happy.
I understand.
But I spent hours of diagnosing a fuel pump.
And since
somebody
she
else
sued you, you now want to.
Correct.
You can't do that.
All right, well,
All right.
you know
So
what
on
I'm
your
saying.
counterclaim 0 and on her claim against you, because there's zero evidence that you burned her fuel pump, and that's what she would have to prove to get you to pay for a new fuel pump. My verdict is for the defendant. Good luck, folks.
So, in this case of a suit and a countersuit, it's a nothing tie. Nobody wins anything in here. You know, I'm sure viewers can really sympathize with you and all the problems you had. Do you understand what the judge said, though? You just didn't have proof that he owed you, another $900.
I knew I didn't have proof. For me, when I went to originally file the claim, it was more so for the inconvenience and making sure that everyone knew that he was doing what he was doing too, especially women that were not aware of what the...
Yeah, it's interesting. He said you were there, and he showed you the burnt fuel pump. And you said all along that never happened.
That never happened.
Really? Never happened?
I actually only saw a fuel pump from the second mechanic, so that was, it was interesting to me as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You must sign a few documents on your way out of the courtroom. John, how do you answer that? You claim you showed her the burnt thing, held it in your hand. She says it never happened.
I've been in business 20 years, and this is the reason why I came, because she was trying to take advantage of kindness as weakness.
Yeah.
I would have, any of my repairs are guaranteed lifetime parts, and obviously this had nothing to do with what we did.
Okay. All right. You satisfied? You
I'm
lost
satisfied.
too, you know.
Well, I'm satisfied.
All right. Both of them are losers, but they're okay. Harvey?
You know, Doug, look, I got to tell you, she probably could have gotten the same answer by having a mechanic evaluate what happened. And that will do it for this case. Litigants for the next case on the way into the courtroom right now.